speed was a blistering 1.5 miles an hour, and it would take 3 hours to get from the base to the summit. And of course, at the end of the day, it would take 3 hours to get from the summit down to the base. Kind of, now, I do like modern conveniences, and this trip is going to take us 45 minutes. And by the way, I have to stand with my back to you, not being rude. I have to pay attention to the braking procedures here. Okay, so that's what I'm monitoring here. So this 45-minute trip down is way better than a 3-hour ride. But of course, back in those days, they were still working on the track and making things up here. There was a hotel up here that would house 150 guests overnight. So there was a lot going on here in the Sound of Mount Washington between all the buildings up here and the Cog Railway. So the workers, of course, on the railway, well, as they were up here, they didn't want to wait for this slow train to take them down to the valley. At the end of the day, you know, the men wanted to get down to the valley and go do whatever it was that they wanted to do at the end of a day's work, if you know what I mean. So they had plenty of wood here, and they got to looking at it, and they decided, well, you know, if I get a 4-foot piece of wood here, it's about 8 to 12 inches wide. That's big enough to put over the center section of track, the rack, where the cogs go in that are underneath the engine, and the coach, of course. And so they affixed a couple of foot pegs and a kind of a seat, and they put it over the rack. And they also figured, well, we got to do something to slow us down, so they created a couple of hand brakes that they would hold on either side, kind of like that, and it would go up to the metal rack in the middle of the track to slow them down, to go down the mountain. So they tried it out, and it worked. It went down a little quicker than the train. So the first few guys that go down, they get down there and they say, well, how long did it take you to get down there? Well, it took me 1.5 hours instead of 3 hours. They said, well, that's pretty good. I bet I could do it in 1 hour and 15 minutes. One of the other guys says, oh yeah, well, I did it in 1 hour and 10 minutes the other day. Do you see where this kind of conversation's going? You know, yeah, guys being competitive. And so the fastest time on one of those slide boards, which is just a 4-foot long piece of wood, right, with a couple of handbrakes, 2 minutes, 45 seconds. Yeah, I heard the woes, yeah. Now, let's do some math. The track is about 3¼ mile long, about 3 miles. And 2 minutes and 45 seconds is less than 3 minutes. So these guys were averaging over 60 miles an hour. Is it any wonder that they call these things a devil's shingle? You can imagine there was some spills along the way. And if you can see my gesture here, these guys were nuts doing that. They were just crazy. That's fast. The engine name there is Kennison, that I can run faster than. Now there's a good question. Who named Mount Washington?
George Washington.
I think the question that begs to be asked is, before the Europeans got here, what did the Abenaki call Mount Washington? Any ideas? What did the Abenaki, the local tribe, call Mount Washington?
The tall mountain.
Agiokuchuk. Try that one again. Agiokuchuk. That's what they called Mount Washington. Then the Europeans came along and ultimately called it Mount, what we know it as now, Mount Washington. Now, You've heard of the Presidential Range up there? All the Presidential Mountains, Monroe and Jefferson and Pierce and Edison and all the rest of them. Well, there is up there Mount Clay, and the legislature renamed Mount Clay a few years ago. They passed the legislation and they call it Mount Reagan. The funny thing is, the cartographers, the people that make the maps, they're still putting it on as Mount Clay. There is a Mount Clinton up there, but it was Mount Clinton long before Bill Clinton was around. So we're coming down into the valley. The base station is starting to get into sight. Got a little business pieces to go over with you. Engineer Mike is going to give us a blast on the whistle shortly to announce our arrival. I'd like for everybody to remain seated, of course, as we pull into the station. We have another switch to go over. And as we come in and park and come to a stop, I do need to be the first one off the coach to make sure that we have a safe point of departure. I'll hop right back on and let you know it's good for you to depart. So if you could help me out with that and just stay seated, I would appreciate that. Is home to some really wild weather. We average over 100 days of over 100 mile an hour winds up on the summit. We get 97, 98 inches of rain and 24, 25 feet of snow. And it can change quick. It's not always like this. But some days it is, and some days it changes. Some days it changes with having cloudy, and then it clears off. It can change in 5 minutes. It's just an amazing place. Every day is different. Sometimes even every run is different. So I'd encourage you to come back again sometime. Maybe check it out in the wintertime. Bring your skis and just go up to Quwaback Station and check that out. Fall foliage is the busiest time of year here. People come up to see all the foliage. It's just pretty spectacular up here. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of Engineer Rick, myself, and Scott, your brakeman, thank you from the Mount Washington Railway. Come back and visit us again.
I'm tired, but it's good. Hey, gentlemen. Excuse me? Who is it?
he has to get a haircut. My dad's making him.
They should just.
I've washed.
I've had that before. Yeah, I've had that.
Okay, we're not getting off yet. Wait.
Nice ride, everybody.
All of our hair. My favorite student is this right here.